Okay, so welcome to the call today. I'd like to thank you for your time. We're going to be talking about the five most dangerous trends facing the Australian IT companies in 2014. And joining me on the call today, I've got Hayden McMaster from Synapse IT. Hayden's been around and in the industry for the past 13 years, and he's really here just to help me understand a bit more from a technical point of view, and also just to help sort of clarify what has been going in the IT industry. Welcome to the call, Hayden.
Hi, David. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So, I suppose what we want to talk about is really what are these dangerous trends and what's going on. But even before I do that, one of the interesting things, and I better start just telling the audience a bit about myself. I've been coaching businesses for the past 13 years, but prior to that, I was in the IT industry as well for another 10 years. And during my time in IT, I was there for the tech boom during the sort of 1999, 2000 era when things sort of crashed and the bubble burst. And I remember when we were selling IT sort of solutions and we were selling websites that were worth, millions of dollars, which you can now buy for about $50. So it's interesting to see the transition, but I've always been interested in what happens in the IT industry. During my time with Action Coach as a business coach, I've won several awards, but most of those have been my favorite ones are the ones where we get best client results. And that really just talks about what we do in the background. But let's move on to today's discussion. So the very first piece of information that I wanted to share with the listeners is what's really going on out in the world in general. And we've moved from the information age into the communication age. And I think what's happened is that if we look at the average number of marketing messages a person receives a day, go back 20 years, 1992, the average person was receiving about 2,000 messages a day. 1 year later, they're up to 3,000 messages a day. We actually take these numbers and we move forward and we project them. And what we found is that people in 2012 would be receiving on average 30,000 marketing messages a day. Now, it sounds like a large number, but that takes into consideration things like when you're on a Google search and you've got people who have got AdWords on the side. It's banner ads. It's all the sorts of inbox information that we get in our email. There's just so much information that people are having to deal with. So it makes it more and more difficult from a marketing point of view to get your message through. So I suppose that's one of the themes I wanted to talk about today. Let's go into danger number one. So danger number one, global competition. So Hayden, do you want to just give me a bit of background on this one?
Yeah, I guess the development of technology over the last few years has really opened this one up. And there's two main aspects of this that I see affecting IT businesses. One is the ability for corporations, big vendors, to use technology to circumvent the traditional channels. So 10 years ago, you had Microsoft. They had to sell to a distributor, and then the distributor would sell to a reseller, i.e., IT companies, and the IT company would then obviously sell products to end users. With the advent of the cloud and technology, I guess they no longer need those middle partners. They can now start selling direct to end users,
Yeah.
which is obviously a big concern for IT companies.
Okay, so really what we're saying is that the internet has actually done wonders to improve the ability to communicate, but it's also closed the world into a very small space.
Correct.
And
I guess the other aspect is 10 years ago people were quite limited. Service providers were quite limited to their own little geographical area.
Yeah.
Now what we're seeing is foreign companies can come in and undercut local providers and provide remote support at a much cheaper rate.
Yep.
Again, that's made possible by improvements in technology.
Okay, and really this is not going away. It's only going to get either worse or better depending which side of the coin you look at, right? But for the local provider who used to have that isolation where they were the only one that could provide the service and that was their protection, now they're dealing with people from all over the world that can actually provide a lot of the services they were offering before. And it sort of brings me to my next point. So how do we deal with this global competition? Well, I suppose the first thing is that global competition brings price competition. And in essence, what happens is we're competing with people who are getting paid an hourly rate of much, much less than we would be paid in this country.
Correct.
And I suppose the average tech in this country, well, their charge out time is going to be anything from $60 an hour to $160 an hour, where we can get IT support from overseas. And we're not talking countries where people don't know what they're talking about. We're talking about people with university degrees where we can pay anything like $3 to $5 or $10 an hour. So it's orders of magnitude difference.
Mm.
So how do we deal with this? Well, here's the first thing that I sort of realized is that price competition occurs for two reasons. The first reason is that the buyer actually knows what they're looking for exactly, in which case they know more about what they need from you than you do. So they're fully informed. And that way they can tell the difference between what is value and what's not value. The second thing that comes up is this thing called alternative choices of supply. And really, I suppose what we talked about with this global competition is people have now got a lot of choices. I don't need to use the local IT guy anymore. I can use an IT guy from anywhere in the world. In most cases, they can remotely manage. So how do we deal with this? Once we've sort of got this door open, this Pandora's box of all these alternatives, how do we actually cope or deal with it? And this is where we talk about, this is a belief of mine, and I talk to a lot of my clients about this. I don't believe people buy on price. A lot of people out there will argue with me on this one and say, of course they buy on price because if it's cheaper, surely I'm not going to be able to compete. But this is where mindset needs to change, because the first thing people need to think about is, what if people don't buy on price, what do they buy on? And what I found is that the reality is that people are buying on perceived value or value. And what's the distinction between price and value? It's simply perception. It's how people see things. So what I'd like to point out here is that really people need to start thinking about, well, how do I increase the value of what I deliver to the marketplace? So if the guy overseas can provide the same service as I do, I have a problem because I can't compete with that. So how do you think people can, or how do you suggest people do compete with this whole value proposition? What sort of things can they do?
I guess local providers obviously have a major advantage in as much as they can get physically in front of clients.
Yep.
Remote people, that's not quite possible.
Mm.
So I think it's really about getting to know the clients, getting to know their business, and really getting to know how you can best help improve their business with technology, rather than just being some faceless person on the other end of the phone who's going to fix their printer if it stops working, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
So it's not obviously you're still working in IT, but you're doing at a more higher level.
Okay. So really, it's almost finding out what the value is, and the value is something that people can't already get elsewhere, or something that they actually think is of benefit to them. So let's just quickly talk about this. There's a formula that I use for what value is, and it's pretty simple. If we look at what value is, it's basically a combination of a few things. The first thing is quality. So quality of product, quality of service. The second thing is speed. And excuse me, that's how quickly people can actually get access to what help they need. Now, speed is sort of taken away a lot by remote servicing and remote management and so forth. So quality is really going to come down to how quickly things can get fixed and how effective you are as a tech in keeping people up and running. Look, the last thing that value is measured on is price, but it's only one of the components. So if we look at quality and speed and say, how can we improve that? That's how we can improve our value proposition to the client. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
Yeah. Cool. So let's go to danger number 2. So danger number 2, you've mentioned here, commoditization of the industry. Can you elaborate on that a bit for a second?
Yeah, I think that if you look back 10 years ago, when you wanted to buy a computer, you went to a computer shop and you spoke to the computer expert in the computer shop, and he told you about all different models.
Yep.
Now, computer shops, there aren't many left anymore. And when people want to buy computers, they can just go to Harvey Norman or JB Hi-Fi and they just buy a box that's on the shelf in between the TVs and the alarm clocks. They're not, computers aren't a special mystery anymore like they used to be. They're just another appliance that everybody has.
And I suppose part of it is I don't care how big my hard drive is or how much memory is in my computer anymore.
It's more than you need.
It's more than I need.
10 years ago, I was always, every 6 months you want to buy a new computer because the new computer could do more than the old computer could do, whereas now you really don't care because for the last 5 years, every computer you've had has done the job.
Right.
Unless you're doing something pretty fancy with it, but for most people, that's not the case.
That's true, because I don't know how big my hard drive is. All I know is when it's full. If it's full, I need a new computer. And so the numbers don't matter anymore. So I suppose with a commoditized industry, that sort of brings up that next point is, well, how do we move out of that situation? And it's sort of, there's a simple way of looking at this. I always look at businesses that commoditize, and I say, look, when you commoditize a business, and it's going to happen over time, it's natural. Okay. because we get better, we improve, technology improves, and what used to be the new fandangled idea is now just the expectation. So as a business owner, one of the things I often teach to people is you're either growing or you're dying. There is no standing still. Now, IT is especially sort of especially the case. Is that if people aren't thinking about what the next thing is and how they can add value to it, they're going to commoditize very quickly, which means their prices are going to get crunched. So how do we move from commodity up the ladder? Well, the next thing we need to think about is products and service. Now, if we look at products and service, what happens is, and the example I use is mobile phones. People would buy a mobile phone as a product in the good old days, and then they'd go and shop around for the best rate per minute for mobile phone calls. And what happened is the mobile phone companies got sick to death of this and said, we need to do something about this. So they started creating these bundles. And in the bundle, you buy a plan. And you actually don't buy the product anymore, the phone. The phone is free. And I think this is starting to happen all over the place. Where we get this sort of situation where people are buying a product and now the product's commoditized, so now they're looking towards the service and they're almost expecting the product to be part of that. So now people don't buy phones anymore, they just update their phone every time there's a new phone available. They don't buy cars anymore, they lease cars. And the nice thing about leasing a car is you pay the same amount every month and you just get the new one every 3 years. And I think the same expectation is happening with phones. Now, is that happening with computers? Do you believe?
I think it is more and more. We used to see a lot of businesses would buy computers and they'd hang on to them for grim death until they stop working. Now it is more about the service, so they're more likely to rotate their equipment so that it can be more easily serviced.
Yep.
So that they get a better experience out of it rather than hanging on to old equipment.
Yeah. Yeah, so what I think is going to happen is that you combine a product and a service together. It's now an offering, and an offering is basically a bundle. And I think people are getting to the point they go, I don't care what my computer is, as long as I can get on it and do what I need to do. So long as I can access my website, so long as I can access my files, and so long as I can communicate. So if we look at that offering, it actually the more we can add value to it, the more we can actually start moving above this particular line and changing it to an experience. And I think ultimately that's what people are looking for. They buy these computers, they buy this software, they buy this and that and the other. In essence, they're looking for a great operational experience. And what I mean by that is you turn your computer on, it comes on. You call someone, they get called. You open a file, you open the file. You want to send it, you can send it. They just want things to happen. They don't care about the sort of bits and bobs that go on behind that. And ultimately, if we can create a predictable experience or unique experience, what happens is we start adding value to what we do. So as we move up this ladder, the next thing is this thing called transformation. Now, it's interesting, when you used to look at the old days, computers transform the way we do things because they automate so many things that we used to do and they make us look professional and they allow us to communicate from anywhere. And this can transform a business, but that's now not so exciting because people now have an expectation that they can do this, especially with internet. People now know I should be able to get internet anytime, anywhere. And so it's not a transformation anymore, it's now an expectation. So what's the next stage for the computer industry, do you think? What's going to cause the transformation?
Obviously, there's a lot of focus on mobile devices, and I think that's something that's been going on over the last couple of years. Particularly, I know a lot of people don't like iPhones, but when you look at it, since that's been released, every person pretty much now has a smartphone, and with all the apps that are available, you can get your CRM or you can get your financial applications or whatever as a simple app on your phone and use that anywhere. So in the industry, a lot of the large vendors are worried that the sales of PCs are starting to plummet because people are now deciding they don't even need computers; they just need a phone or a tablet or something to that effect.
Yeah. So really, what's happening is people are now saying, I just expect. I don't care what the computer is. I just need the access. And so, like you say, some people are actually throwing their computer in the bin and just going with the tablet. And I suppose the driver there is it's a transformation. Now I carry this little device around, which weighs bugger all, has a long battery life, and has instant internet access. I don't need all the extra things that my laptop used to give me or that my desktop used to give me. And that's what we consider a transformation. Now, I don't think it's going away. I think it's one of those things that's here to stay, isn't it?
Definitely, it's just rolling on. You can't. It's certainly not going to turn back.
Yeah. So I suppose really we look at the IT industry and say, well, let's crystal ball gaze a bit and say, well, where's all this going? What is the next stage? So tablets have come in and they've actually reduced the dependency on the computer at the client end. What do you think is going to happen next?
Well, from a service provider's point of view, I guess it's around how you actually adjust your business model to be more in tune with that.
Mm.
If your business model is stuck on servicing desktop PCs,
Yep.
then that's uh, that's going to be a problem. So I think that people need to start to adjust more towards looking at cloud services, how they can better interoperate with some of these mobile
Mm.
devices, um, and start to look at software applications that are more related, more focused on the customer's experience and their usage of the information rather than the actual devices and how those devices are maintained.
Yep. Okay. So really, like I suppose as an IT provider, we're becoming much more humanized, and we're really looking to make sure that people are getting a good experience out of whatever product they choose to use.
Correct.
And it's more rather than the product, it's actually the service that they expect or the sort of what the software delivers. Or
As you said before, they just need to do what they need to do.
yeah,
They don't really care about how they go about doing it.
okay, fantastic. So that takes us on to danger number three. So tell us a bit about danger number three.
Well, I guess previously you'd go into a company and
Mm.
the IT department or the consultant or whoever was doing the IT would be dictating to users, this is the computer you're going to use, this is the software you're going to use, this is
Mm.
how you're going to use it.
Yeah.
Whereas now, because users are a lot more educated and
Mm.
computers are a lot more prolific, they're more likely to come in and say, well, I'm not going to use this BlackBerry that you give me. I'm going to use my own iPhone, or I'm
Mm.
going to bring my own laptop in because the one you've given me is too heavy, or you get these sort of discussions
Yeah.
happening. And it's really a matter of whether the businesses or the IT departments or the IT companies are going to embrace that and let them use their own stuff and maybe be more productive with it, or whether they're going to have a battle about it and say, well, we're going to try and stop you from doing that.
Mm.
That's something that's going on in the industry right now.
Yeah, so I suppose I understand this, and this is interesting because it seems like most people have a personal choice on devices, and they like a particular style of computer or or tablet or phone, and they're starting to impose that on the organisations they work for and saying, well, this is my preferred method of communication, fit in with what I have,
Mm.
rather than having to carry two phones around. Because I suppose we've seen it in the past few years. People carry two or three phones, two or three computers, or they'll have their own iPad and they'll have a work laptop. And these days we're looking at integration and the end users becoming more predominant in the decision making.
Well, there's some cost savings there for companies as well, where if you have a large number of users who are saying, I don't want to use stuff you're giving me, I want to use my own, maybe the company's better off embracing that and figuring out a way that the user can use their own, obviously you have to
Mm.
factor in your data security and making sure they can't take your intellectual property, but
Yeah.
maybe you end up with a productivity boost and a reduction in capital expense rather than battling them on that.
It's an interesting story because I suppose in my day when I was in the IT industry, laptops were one of those big things that were quite an expensive item, and only the executives would get laptops. And it didn't take long for a lot of companies to recognise that giving out laptops was the best thing they could ever do. Because what it forced is, or what happened as a result of it, is people would take their work home with them. And so all of a sudden they were getting all these extra hours out of their employees without having to pay for them.
Mm.
So it's not dissimilar to what you're just suggesting. Is that the more the influence comes from the user, the more a company embraces that, the more productivity they're going to get out of those people as well.
Mm.
The analogy I used here was often I talk about what's happening in the world of marketing because it's changed dramatically because of this communication age as well. And in the old style of marketing, there were the 4 Ps, and we used to talk about product, price, place, and promotion. And if you think back to how IT companies used to work, if you were in the right place and you had the right price and the right product, you got the deal. But what's happening now is with this market opening up with the communication channels and the globalization, we're moving away from the old 4 Ps to what we call now the 4 Cs of marketing. And the first thing is content. And I suppose the reason I bring this up is because as you talk about users having influence, one of the reasons is because they can get a lot of information easily.
Mm.
And they used to have no access to information except for what was given to them. But now they can jump online and they can find this content. Now, a lot of it's coming from the vendors, and a lot of it's coming from other suppliers who are just trying to educate the end user to influence the choices of their products. So the vendors are encouraging the user to become more educated as well. The second thing that we talk about is context. And in marketing, that just means that people can get information on the spot. And even these days, what I'm finding is a lot of users that have problems with their computers can Google it and find solutions in chat sessions that sometimes they just fix their own problems. So having this ability to get the right information at the right time is really sort of changing the face as well. But the two last things is connection and community. Now, this always on in a community that we live in now, where if you don't have internet, all of a sudden you have a bit of a seizure. I don't know, it happens to me. I'm checking my phone regularly for what's going on in the world, news, email, so forth.
I think it's an addiction.
It can be, right? It can be, and part of it is that once you're used to having that connection, you don't need to wait to find stuff anymore. You can find it wherever you are. It sort of kills a lot of arguments too, because any arguments that occur, we can usually Google the answers. And the last one is community, and I think there is a lot going on in the marketplace where people are now getting to collaborate with people they would have never in the past. So there's a lot of this sort of friends telling friends what to do. So I suppose the reason I bring that up is because as the users get all of this access, what it does, it also lifts the level of knowledge they have, which sort of gives them more influence. And the other side of this is really just talking about, what does an IT company do? And I think what they need to think about is the marketing they need to do now is based around customer service. It's not based around the product. It's not based around the megabytes. It's not based around is my software better or worse. I think what people are really looking for is, does my IT service provider give me the attention that I need and resolve my issues quickly? So let's move on to the next danger, which is danger number 4, rate of change. Tell me a bit about this one, Hayden.
Well, obviously, I don't think many people would argue that things are changing not only in the industry but just generally across business and across technology, and the change is accelerating over the last few years.
Yep.
There's things like the cloud coming in, or not coming in; it's already here, obviously. But
yep.
And that poses a few challenges, both a technical and a business challenge. I read a while ago, some time ago, that they were saying that the half-life of knowledge in the IT industry is 2 years. So effectively, half of what you know today from a technical point of view is useless in 2 years' time. So as things change, obviously, it's a challenge from a technical point of view to keep on top of that and to be able to stay fresh. Otherwise, you end up just as a company that's offering yesterday's solution, and nobody wants to buy that.
Yeah.
From a business point of view, the way that the solutions are built and offered, things are going away from on-premise, they're going to the cloud. I was saying before that the channels are changing, the vendors have more influence.
Yep.
So from a business point of view, you also need to be able to change and adapt to that to avoid being left behind in a market that is not suitable for the old way of doing business.
Right. Okay. So really, this rate of change is a challenge. The way I look at rate of change is it's one of those areas that it's going to accelerate. It's that old Moore's law, which says people or the rate of acceleration of technology is multiplying. And what I think people need to think about is, well, what sort of business are we in? Because learning the technology is getting harder if it's getting faster. There's more and more things happening. The beauty is the users now are sort of learning more about how to use the technology than we do. So where does that put the IT company? I mean, what business are you in? It's a trick question.
Yeah, well, I guess there's a couple of things. One is you either need to really upskill and become more of an expert, whereas previously you could be an expert with a lower level of knowledge. Now you need to become a much higher level expert, which, as we're just saying, is difficult because things change, and that knowledge that you need to be an expert is changing. Or as you were touching on before, you need to be more customer focused and more in the business of looking after your clients.
Yeah. And this is the thing. Most people, if I ask them what business they're in, they'll usually say, I'm an IT guy. or I'm in the software industry, or I'm in this industry, or what industry. What I found out is that most people miss the mark on what business they actually are in. And the thing I've learned is that every single business owner I meet is in one business, and that's what I call client intimacy. And what I mean by that is finding a client and making sure you have a super strong relationship with that client. Because in the end, if you think about it, the technology is just going to keep changing. Um, Things change quickly. They change in sort of different ways. Coping and keeping up to date with the change is difficult. But what tends to stay is the relationship that you have with your clients. So I often ask people to look at their client intimacy or their client relationship and find out how strong that is. Because when the technology changes and you sort of throw out what you're currently using and have to implement the new stuff, if they've got a strong relationship with you, they're going to trust you to do it. If they don't, they're going to say, oh, geez, I bought this server and I don't need a server anymore. I can get all this stuff done on the cloud. I'll need to go with another company. So it's tricky, but I often say to people, you've got to look at how your client relationships are going and how they're tracking, because that client intimacy is what it's all about. Sort of brings us on to danger number 5. So increased expectation. What's this one all about, Hayden?
Well, there's users' expectations are increasing in a range of areas.
Yeah.
Basically, people now expect to be able to access all of their stuff from anywhere, all the time, no downtime.
Yeah.
As I was saying before, you can get up at midnight and access your accounting system on your mobile phone if you've got the software to do it. So, whereas that's never been an expectation before, and people are now a lot more educated, as we've been saying, so they know that these things are possible, and even for free they can get things like Dropbox and these other sort of services that allow them to do a whole range of things. So what they expect from IT people is increasing as well.
Yeah, and this is funny because I sort of thought about this increased expectation, and it's across the board. I think that clients out there are getting more savvy. They're getting more intellectual. They're getting smarter about what products are available. They're putting demands on people that might be seen as unreasonable if we sort of look at them in how we used to serve people. But this increased expectation is not going away, and I think that the winners are the people that can actually not only meet that expectation but just go way over and exceed that expectation. And how do you do that? Well, we're living in a world where the technology works both ways. So I know, for example, that you guys can monitor computers remotely. You can have remote software on these computers so that you can check out what's going on. I know that even what you've been doing lately, Hayden, is moving into this space of using the cloud. So not just talking about cloud technology, but actually providing it as a value-added service.
Well, I guess that helps us meet some of these increased expectations around reliability and performance, and enables us to guarantee some of these metrics, whereas previously it wasn't possible to guarantee those. So it helps us meet these clients' increased expectations and make sure that they're happy with what we're doing.
Yep. So I've got a simple belief around this. There's only 2 options: you either change or you die. And we look at the dinosaurs; they didn't survive the ice age. They didn't make it through, and one of the things is they couldn't change. Here we are in a sort of critical path in technology where people are moving away from what the technology is to basically I just want the service available all the time. And so uptime is becoming critical. They also are not that excited about paying big money for boxes sitting in corners anymore, when the internet's giving them enough sort of bandwidth that they could actually just use smaller devices and have access through those things. Tell us a bit about what you've been doing in this space, Hayden.
Well, I guess what we're aiming to do is really to replace, whereas traditionally we've implemented systems on premise for clients, servers, phone systems, computers, the whole lot.
Yep.
We're really looking to have a solution where we phase that out for clients. My thought is that clients shouldn't need to have any of these things on premise anymore.
Yep.
If all of their infrastructure is hosted in the cloud, we've implemented a range of infrastructure in the data center. It basically it increases their reliability because all of their services are running on better equipment than they could afford to buy themselves. It also increases their flexibility and scalability. They can grow the service as they need it. Whereas obviously, if you just buy a box, once you hit its capacity, you have to chuck it out and buy a new box. And also it allows us to control the environment a lot more, which ultimately gives them a better experience because things are less likely to break, less likely of getting viruses and those sort of issues. So
Mm.
their experience is a lot more smooth.
Yep. Let me ask you, what made you decide to build like this cloud? Because I suppose for some of the listeners there that don't know, look, Hayden and Synapse, what they've done is they've put together a cloud-based solution that's localized. And so rather than just logging into some server where we don't know where it is and we don't know what country it's in or the reliability, what Hayden's put together is a localized cloud solution, which actually helps companies put all their IT into a cloud that's basically managed in Australia, and provides a number of services. So maybe you want to explain a bit more about that service or that product.
Yeah. About product.
Mm.
So essentially, what we're doing for clients is moving their moving their servers to our cloud environment.
Yep.
We're hosting virtual desktops.
Mm.
We're hosting virtual phone systems. So really taking away the reliance on-premise equipment for all these things, because no matter how good the on-premise equipment you're deploying is, you still can't guarantee that it won't fail, because at the end of the day, it's not redundant. It's
Yep.
just a single point of failure.
Mm-hmm.
Also, customers obviously have to buy that. They can lease it, but they have to buy it, and then they have to maintain it, and then they have to get rid of it, and they have to buy a new one when it's time to do that. So
Mm-hmm.
this sort of removes all of those hassles.
Right.
And the reason why we looked at doing that was because we looked at what was happening in the industry, and as we've talked about over the last few minutes, the with the rate of change of things and the way the industry is moving, it's just becoming more and more difficult to provide ad hoc services to businesses when the users know more about, or they think they know more about what they want than we do.
Yep.
Um, and price competition is increasing. Price competition is increasing. So this sort of helps us combat a lot of those things and really provide a better experience for the client.
Okay. So really, what you're doing is you're moving out of the pack, and you're saying, look, rather than trying to compete on price on these commoditized products, and it's not getting any better. Computers are getting cheaper. They're getting more available. You can walk into a JB Hi-Fi now, and there's like 50
Shelves
different.
of computers to just pick one up and off you go.
Yeah, and really they all look very similar these days, and the difference is really the price point. So people are walking in and buying a computer and walking out, and it's done. So what you sort of talked about is that now you're providing that sort of server-based service where it's remote, so they don't even need to buy these servers anymore. How does that work with the other IT companies that are out there? Have you thought about that as well?
Well, we are working with a couple of other companies who are leveraging our environment. I think that when you look at local IT companies, there's a
Yep.
couple of views you can take, and one is that obviously in some ways we compete because we're in the same area.
Mm.
But as we've talked about before, it's no longer local competition; it's global competition.
Yep.
So um, to me, our real competitors aren't other local companies. They are the big vendors who have a lot more clout than any of us do,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to just come and take all our clients off us.
Mm.
So I think that it's really important for local companies to work together to help build better solutions, because
Yep.
together you can build a better solution and better compete with some of these bigger vendors than you can as a whole bunch of just little individual people doing your own thing.
Yep.
Eventually, will all be unnecessary.
Yeah. Well, look, I suppose, like you say, the vendors just want to sell the boxes. And so they're pushing down into the marketplace saying, you guys aren't doing a good job, get out of the way, we'll sell them.
Well, there's also the software vendors, the ones that are, they're trying to cut out the middle people.
Yep.
There's other foreign companies who are
Mm.
trying to offer services
Yep.
from, cheaper prices. So everybody's trying to displace the local businesses.
Yep. So really, I suppose it brings the question is, what is the value proposition? What is the local guy able to do that none of these guys can do? And I suppose what you've just suggested is, well, it's not about selling computers. It's actually about providing the service. And really, I suppose it's about discovering what that service is going to be. And there's an interesting saying I picked up along the way, and it's called the law of compensation, and it's pretty simple. It just basically means that your income is determined by how many people you serve, how well you serve them. Now, if we talk about client intimacy, as we discussed before, it really comes down to asking the question, well, what does the client need that I can deliver that is local. Because as a local IT company, you're going to find it's arms and legs and a face and a name and a person who can actually help them navigate what's going on in the IT industry. And I suppose what you've just discussed with your particular angle that you've taken, where adding value is by creating a cloud solution that anyone can use, including other IT companies. Now they can focus on what's important, which is basically serving the client.
Hmm.
And it sounds funny because some people would see that as a threat and say, hang on, that's the product we're supposed to be selling. But if each IT company tries to provide their own cloud or their own service in that way, it's going to be quite expensive to actually launch that for every one of them. Where really, I suppose the true value for an IT company is the relationship. And so your role is really to preserve that relationship with the IT company and their customers and just provide a service which actually minimises the pain.
Hmm.
Mm. Excellent. All right. So look, I suppose they're the dangers, and I look at those and I think that could be pretty diabolical. So what does someone do about it? And often when people look at how they're going to grow in a competitive environment like this, it actually is a bit tricky. I use a formula that we've been using to build businesses for a while now, and it's pretty straightforward. Any company that I work with, one of the key things that the business owner must do is actually innovate. And innovation is about thinking outside the box or thinking ahead of the trend and saying, well, what's happening right now? How can I make sure that I'm ahead of the trend and not a dinosaur? It's something like you wouldn't want to be owner of a video rental shop right now. It's one of those places, it's one of those environments where that's really sort of on the way out the door.
Well, I mentioned computer shops before. I wouldn't want to own a computer shop either.
Yeah, because in the end, the value a computer shop used to offer is that they could assemble these things and they could customize them and make sure that you got the right product. But with a commoditized product now, it's like, well, I can virtually buy my computer in the supermarket and I go do my local shopping. So if that value is diminished or gone, then what has to happen is people need to be focused on that entrepreneurial side of things and coming up with the value add. And the way we often talk about it from a coaching perspective, as I say, before you can do that, you need to be back in control of your business. And most people don't have this mastery level. What I mean by mastery is that it's easy to get stuck in the day-to-day problems of a business. People have issues with time management, they have issues with cash flow management, they have issues with just being clear on where they're going, and they're living in chaos. Now, the problem with chaos is you can't live in that space for very long. So I think once people build that mastery and get stability, they can now focus on exactly what you've discussed today, which is getting into an area of the market where you can add value, or also known as a niche. Now, every IT company that's out there could get into the niche themselves or a niche themselves if they could have the time to stop and look at what's going on in the marketplace. Now, for you, you've chosen to go into the niche of providing this cloud-based solution at a local level. For other people, it might be that their niche is that they have a specific sector that they work with, or they have a specific set of skills that they can deliver to a customer, or they're just really good at taking those headaches away. And the reason we talk about moving into a niche is for predictable cash flow. And once we've got cash flow, that doesn't solve the problems that we've talked about today. But what it does is it gives us the ability to actually do something about it by investing. And so often I look at that and I say, well, what do we do once we've got a bit of cash? Because we can work hard and work hard and work hard, but the problem is that technology is changing and the world's changing. So we need to start thinking about leverage. And when I talk about leverage, I'm just talking about business systems. And systems are meant to make our business more efficient. And people go, well, that's all obvious. But see, here's the key for me is when you're more efficient in what you do, you now have time. And with that time, you can start looking at what's going on in the marketplace. And you can start looking at where the trends are and what the opportunities are and start looking at what you need to change. Now, if we don't have time, and this is where a lot of people are falling off the cliff, is they're so busy trying to serve their customers and do it for cheaper because people are demanding on price. They run out of time, and then they just keep going, keep going, keep going until they realise that now they're competing with the $3 an hour guy over in India, and that's tough. So unless they've got the time back to innovate and to think about niche and to go back into building their business, it becomes a bit tricky. And I think with this time, then we can start thinking about how do we build a team. Now, these days, team is a hybrid. And the reason I bring this up, I know a lot of companies that have got onshore and offshore resources because some of the things can be done offshore. Some of the help desk requests can be done offshore. A lot of companies are using outsourced IT companies. A lot of companies are using outsourced administration. There's all sorts of virtual support available these days. So building this team is really quite key in moving forward as well. And that's all about structure for growth. because when we've got growth within the business, we get happy people, you know, and happiness really is a function of building the right team and having the right systems in place and getting the right target market. But ultimately, we're looking for synergy. And we are in interesting times for IT companies right now, because those guys that are trying to hang on to the past and hoping that it's just a blip on the radar, um, I think they're going to soon realize that it's not. This fad of cloud, you call it a fad, but I think it's here to stay. I think people will use the internet. It might be in different shapes. The bandwidth that people are using is becoming greater. As bandwidth increases, the need to have local storage decreases. So I think what you've done there with the cloud solution is excellent, because you're really just embracing what the future is about. Look, the last thing with synergy is about getting a well-oiled machine and giving us freedom in business. Now, I talk about this because often the business owners bog down in the engine room of the business, and they don't have time to create these ideas or to move into these spaces. And when I look at the freedom that a business owner should have, the only reason they don't have is because they're stuck working in the business rather than working on it. And when we talk about results, we're talking about multiplication, we're talking about acquisition, we're talking about winning back time, and we're even talking about getting back the cash, or the cash flow that we used to have. So, we sort of, we're just moving on to the hour shortly, but I'd like to sort of maybe ask you, Hayden, just to sort of final ideas to wrap up. Like, we've talked about what the most dangerous trends are facing the IT companies now. If you were starting from scratch today as an IT company, what sort of things would you be considering, or what would you do differently?
That's an excellent question.
I know I put you on the spot here.
I think that I guess when you're starting from scratch, to me, that's not the difficult part, because I think a lot of people who start IT companies are IT people, and I'm like that, and I'm sure a lot of the people who are listening to this are probably like that.
Mm-hmm.
To me, the main challenge was around finding the right team members once you get to the point where you want to grow that.
Yeah.
So you really need some systems in place around how you manage a team, and a lot of that, I guess, it's a good story about what we need to be providing for our clients as well, because what's made a big difference for us is around the systems that we've put in internally, our infrastructure, the way we handle our, the systems we use for tracking jobs, system we use for monitoring customers' equipment, the system we use for deploying solutions, and that to me is about what IT is all about. It's about automating things and increasing capability and making things better via technology. And so that's what we need to be focusing on offering to our clients as well. So
that's a really interesting point, because I suppose that's where people get lost in the engine room, is they're trying to fix problems all the time, and they're trying to deal with bugs and viruses and all these sorts of things. Where in the end, if you think about it, your job is to make your customers' workplace more efficient. Because that's really what IT is all about, isn't it? It's just about efficiency. It's about better communication. It's about better presentation. It's about more timely information. And the big thing now is connecting and being in communication with everyone within the organisation. So I suppose if you look at it from that point of view and say, well, my job as an IT support company is actually to improve the performance of my client's business, really you're moving up a level, aren't you?
And I think that's what IT companies need to be focusing on.
So rather than boxes and bits, it's all about almost business improvement to a large degree.
Well, at the end of the day, that's why companies buy computers. And if a computer can't offer some sort of business improvement, then they should just go and buy a pencil and paper. And I've had a client tell me that. They said, we're not buying this, so we're going to just go buy a notepad and a pencil, because we don't see that it's worth the investment. And that's perfectly reasonable. It's not worth the investment.
Yeah, and I think ultimately that's exactly the truth. People are looking for value for money. They're looking to say, well, do I really need this? Is there a better opportunity to use the money elsewhere? If it's buying a pencil and paper, then that's fine. But really, and the challenge for the IT company now is to say, well, how can I add value? I mean, all the technology, it's easily available, so buying it from me is not, it's not as hard to buy stuff as it used to be. So now the question is, what can I do to add value to that solution? Look, that's been really great. Is there any last thoughts that you wanted to finish up on today, Hayden?
I think we've pretty much covered everything. No, I think
that's it from you.
that's it from me.
Excellent.
Unless anybody would like to have a chat about our cloud solutions at some stage, I'm sure they can be in touch with yourself, David, and get our contact details.
What I'd suggest, and especially anyone who's listened through today's session, what I've learned is that if you don't do something, if there's no action taken as a result of learning something, then that becomes a sort of not a good use of your time. So what I'm going to do is anyone who'd like to be in contact with Hayden or myself, the easiest way to do that is just to jump on our websites. My website's davidguest.com.au. If they want to get in touch with you, Hayden, from Synapse, what's the best contact method?
Again, probably jump on our website, which is www.itconsultants.com.au.
Okay.
Yep. And you can shoot through a contact request on there, and I'll get it and be straight back in touch.
Great. So really, I suppose the outcome of today's session is to really help people understand that there are great ideas out there. There is a way to move forward in the IT industry. There's actually a lot of opportunity for those people who are willing to look forward. The key is to actually do something about it. So we're here to help. If anyone needs that help, either contact myself or Hayden. I'll make sure that the email that goes out after today's session has our contact details on it. And we're glad to help, happy to help the people on the call. So what I'd like to do is thank you very much for your time today, Hayden.
Thank you, David.
It's been very valuable, and I hope the listeners today have enjoyed the call as well. Thanks.